Hello and a very warm welcome viewers. You're watching Policy Watch with your host Kriti Mishra. The Ministry of Civil Aviation has published the National Unmanned Aircraft System Traffic Management Policy paper, inviting views from stakeholders. The aim is to carve out a definitive national policy on flying drones alongside scheduled and non-scheduled manned aircraft. The primary objective of this policy document is to define how various UA operational scenarios will be enabled in the low-level airspace using the ecosystem and the regulatory system referred to as the Digital Sky Platform. This document identifies key stakeholders for enabling seamless UA operations across India. And for deeper insights on the topic, I'm joined by Mr. Dubey, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation, and Mr. Rajan Luthra, Chair FICCI, Drones Committee, and Head Special Projects, Reliance Industries. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, both of you. Mr. Dubey, let me come to you first. Now, the policy document identifies a vision and a roadmap for enabling future UA operational scenarios. In India, drones are already being used by various institutions, including by the police, which used drones to ensure that lockdown rules were implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. Take us through the crucial highlights of this policy paper.
Thank you so much for having us. This policy is a work of several months of effort. It includes some real sharp people from across the government, the regulators, the armed forces, the security forces, and also some very, very smart people from the industry. This is the follow-through from the draft UAS rules, the draft drone rules, which are currently under scrutiny by the Law Ministry, and hopefully before the end of the year, we will be notifying the draft UAS rules, which will actually lay down the whole framework for drone operations in the country. A crucial chapter of that relates to the traffic management, because all these drones, when the thousands of drones will fly, to give a perspective, if you look at the commercial aircraft on the domestic side, we have about 660 domestic aircraft. The number of drones will be, already we have 22,000 drones listed. This could even become 1 million or maybe 2 million or maybe 5 million. The numbers are huge. These are very small equipment, and they fly at very low levels, including high levels, and they will fly all over the place. So now we're talking about anywhere from a 250-gram unmanned aircraft to a manned aircraft, which are in 90 tons, 100 tons, 200 tons, even 300 tons or more. So the sky, the Indian airspace, will be full of such a wide variety of aircraft. Now, all these have to operate in a very safe and secure manner without compromising on personal safety, asset safety, and also national security. So that's why a crucial chapter of the UAS rules is on traffic management. And the traffic management then is detailed out in this draft UTM policy. So this UTM policy is actually a follow-through of the draft rules. Now, one option that we had was to wait till the US rules get notified in the Gazette of India. But a view was taken by the government that since this technology is moving at a fast pace, and there is no way we can do it in a sequential mode, so we followed a parallel mode. So that's why the discussion draft of the traffic management policy has been put out for public feedback. By no means this is complete. This is also version 1.0, because we know this is such an evolving field that nobody right now can claim to be a know-all expert. So this policy will evolve. The US rules will also come out, as I said, hopefully before the end of the year. And once we get the public feedback, even the UTM policy, the traffic management of these drones, will also get finalized maybe, say, latest by March of next year. So this is the broad plan, the broad structure you've already spoken about. And as I mentioned, this is a collaboration between government, between regulators, security agencies, armed forces, and the industry. Kriti?
Well, Mr. Luthra, those were the crucial highlights that Mr. Dubey talked about. But talking about the need for a definitive policy in this evolving space for the industry.
I think we already have a very active regulatory environment over the last few months that is encouraging from the industry as a whole. We are seeing a lot of action, including starting with the draft US rules that was just mentioned by Mr. Dubey, and also the new UTM policy and being put up for discussion in the public. I think apart from these, we also have the drone directorate being established recently and being announced. So all these aspects are very encouraging for the commercial industry, especially. The government and the defense were already using these drones. The DPIIT, we are, as an industry body, supporting what is the total addressable market potential for these drones. And some of the figures that we are getting are completely in sync with what Mr. Dubey just mentioned, that the potential for drones in India is huge and the applications are very widespread. So this is absolutely a very welcome and a timely move by the government.
It's a welcome and a timely move, but Mr. Luthra, I'd like to understand what were the regulatory challenges that were hindering the growth of this sector?
I think over the past some period of time, from the time that the commercial drones usage was kind of put to a stop in the middle, for a pause, I would call it. That was, I think, understandable to some degree, because there were very serious concerns by the use of rogue drones as well. And some of those concerns have been addressed partly technologically, partly the regulatory environment as well. And even more than anything else, just understanding how this whole ecosystem works and what are the stakeholders, and then bringing them together. The industry and the industry body that we represent, definitely we were getting a lot of feedback from our stakeholders that they wanted to move much faster, and the impatience was understandable. At the same time, I think the risks are very real, and I think it's a prudent approach to make sure that before we take some of these revolutionary steps, the actual checks and balances are put into place as well.
Right, so as we have the discussion on the policy and also the suggestions from the stakeholders, we'll see what are the checks and balances. But Mr. Dubey, before we get into the specifics of this policy, tell us about the potential of this specific sector.
Drones, drones are the future of aviation. So even if I try and put a number, whether this will be in India a 10 billion or a 100 billion or a 500 billion industry, it's all going to be speculative. So I'll not even try that. Let me just suffice it by saying that maybe within 10 years, you will not even see a pilot in your aircraft when you catch an Indigo or a SpiceJet or a Lufthansa flight tomorrow, or there may not even be a cockpit. Even your plane might be a drone. So if that be the case, I mean, it's very difficult to put a number. Okay, but that may take about 8 to 10 years to happen, or maybe even faster. But till then, these drones, we are finding they have huge usage in mass benefit areas like agriculture, logistics, disaster recovery, law enforcement, and I also already mentioned agriculture, healthcare. I mean, it's you name a sector. In fact, you will struggle to name a sector where drones cannot be used, because at the end of the day, Kriti, what are these equipments? These are nothing but eyes, ears, and limbs in the sky. So anyway, we use eyes, ears, and limbs to move things around or to capture pictures or data on the ground. Now, if you add a flying capability, I mean, it just takes your capability several times over. We've seen it in the COVID times. It was used by law enforcement for crowd control, crowd management, social distancing, etc. We saw it in the locust operations in Rajasthan, where in a space of just 9 days from getting the order from the cabinet secretary, in 9 days we could issue work orders during the peak of May and June, when there was a lockdown and it was difficult to move people around. They were in containment zone. In exactly 9 days, work orders were given without a tender to 5 different drone companies spread across the country, and then they were moved. Pilot was somewhere, the equipment was somewhere, the technicians were somewhere, spread out over the country, and they were all moved, given a work order in 9 days, and moved to Rajasthan, 5 different districts in Rajasthan which are affected by locusts. So that's one. And then on top of that, on the roads, in the road sector, in power sector, with railways, with the various urban local bodies for aerial mapping, for urban development, for disaster relief. I mean, I can spend another half an hour just listing out the various projects which have already been approved. These are already happening as we speak, even in the mining area with Odisha mining. I can just go on and on. So suffice it by saying that there's no sector where drones cannot play a part. Now, our job as a policymaker and the ministry and the regulator is to work very closely with the industry and with the security agencies, as Rajan rightly pointed out, because this is a technology which has both positives and negatives. With just a 250-gram drone, I can create a stampede, I can create a riot. Okay, so that's the power of a 250-gram drone. Now imagine what a 10 kg or a 100 kg drone can do. So while we have very legitimate concerns on both on the side of the MHA, the Home Ministry, and the Defense Ministry, and the security agencies, and then we have to balance that with the growth aspirations of the industry. So it's a very tough balancing act, and we are trying to do as much as possible. We engage with both the government side and on the industry side, and try to forge a path forward. Kriti?
Well, absolutely. The safety and security bit of it, that's a very important aspect, and we'll just come to it in a bit. But before that, the integration of unmanned aircraft system into the national airspace system presents various challenges technically and operationally, Mr. Dubey. How will we ensure complementarity between the two systems?
Right. Well, that's a good question. See, right now, as a Lufthansa or an Indigo or a SpiceJet or an Air India flies in the skies, okay, and there are also military aircraft, both known and unknown, both known flights and secret flights, okay, and it's a very mature ecosystem that we have, wherein the manned aircraft of both commercial and civil very seamlessly integrate with each other. Okay, we have the air traffic control on the commercial side, we have air traffic control on the military side, and there's a seamless handover between the two as an aircraft moves, whether it's a civil or military aircraft, from one to the other. It is the drones which will now create a very, very unique challenge, wherein they will fly across heights. I mean, you have drones which are flying at 50 feet. There are also drones which will fly at 50,000 feet, whereas most of the commercial aircraft fly between 30 and 40,000 feet. So now you can just imagine how complex it's going to be. So even in the expert committee, we have experts from both the Air Force and the Airports Authority of India, the Air Navigation Services, I mean, the ATC part, the air traffic control part of AI, and the Air Force people and the security agencies. All of these are working with the industry. And that's how this discussion draft has come forth. And a seamless coordination will be found to work. What will happen is, say, where you don't have a flight path of a commercial or a military aircraft, there, of course, the drones can be managed with the help of private UTM operators. Just like you have air traffic control, we'll have air traffic control for drones also. And the chances are that this will be actually handled by private entrepreneurs and private enterprises. And these, as you get into, say, an airport zone, suppose there's an Amazon or a Flipkart drone which has to cross, say, a Bangalore airport. Now, how does it seamlessly get handed over to the, just like your aircraft, when you go from Delhi to Bombay, it gets seamlessly passed on from Delhi to, say, Jaipur to, say, Ahmedabad, so on to Mumbai, the air traffic control and the flight region. Similarly, when a drone has to fly across, say, Palam Airport from the north of the airport to the south of the airport, there will be a handover to the air traffic control of the airport authority. And then again, as it crosses over into the safe zone, into the what you call the fun. I don't want to get too technical, but let's just say if it gets out of the operational area, then there'll be again a seamless handover from Airports Authority of India to the private operator, who's going to be the UTM operator for the south of the runway. So this is how it will operate. But of course, it's very easy talking about it, but it's an extremely technical process. And when we have, and these are just not one or two aircraft, there will be hundreds of such aircraft doing the crossovers between the drone flight path and the commercial flight path. So as I said, it's a little complex operation. It will be managed. Kriti?
All right, so you're talking about the opportunities for the private sector and also the coordination between the government stakeholders and the private entities. Mr. Luthra, the digital sky platform is central to India's UAS ecosystem. How can the government ensure a centralized regulatory environment for stakeholders to collaborate in real time to promote the industry?
I think that's a very important point and something that we have been talking about for a fair bit of time. The industry, both in terms of the startups as well as the large scale players who are into the defense sector, I think all of them have significant expectations because they are seeing growth of the drones as a major disruptive technology that is playing a very active role in many parts of the world. America and many of the other countries have already taken significant steps in enabling the collaboration. And I think we are starting to see that in a very significant manner in India also. Between Mr. Dubey, the rest of the government stakeholders, as well as the private sector players and even the academia. We are engaging with all of them from an industry body perspective, a body to have a dedicated drone committee. And we are, over the last 12 to 18 months, we have been able to at least make a headway in getting our point of view across. And many of those recommendations that we have given have been accepted. And I believe it's this collaboration that we need to further streamline and further do it, let's say, in a far greater manner. In fact, I would even make it a point that the collaboration is pretty much in real time for the last few months now. We have the industry players as well as the government sector entities engaging on pretty much a daily or a weekly basis on multiple forums. And I think that is genuinely a very encouraging sign for both the existing players as well as potential investors into the industry.
Well, absolutely. That's a very legit point that you're making, that this collaboration has to be further strengthened. But Mr. Dubey, coming to the most important part of the entire policy, or the most important aspect, well, flying over strategic installations like government administration buildings, defense installations, police and paramilitary installations, even reserve forests, industrial assets of national significance may pose an additional risk. How will we ensure safety of operations, robust data privacy and data security mechanisms?
That's a good question and a slightly technical question. So I'll try and keep it as simple as possible and as short as possible.
Please go ahead,
What you mentioned are actually the red zones. The whole map of India will be broken up into three different regions, very distinct regions: green, red, and yellow. The red zones are as listed out in our regulations itself. I mean, all the sensitive installations, the airport areas, both MHA, MOD areas. Also, there are some limits into the sea, how far you can go from the coastline. You can't do it. You can't move it from a moving platform. You can't operate a drone from a moving car. So there are various kinds of regulations which have been brought in, which on one hand will make it easy for genuine players to go and make money and also give us a legitimate share of the GST and taxes and create jobs. That's on the growth part. And also on the safety and security angle, we also don't want people to fly over what we call Papa Bravo Victor, people building vehicles. They will not be allowed in the initial phases. And maybe later on, as you go into beyond visual line of sight and carrying payloads, then of course gradually those will be opened up, basically going into urban areas, flying over houses. Now that may be allowed at a later stage, and of course that will be allowed only to a very few people who will be licensed to do so. But in most other cases, as I said, there will be clear zonal maps, and most of the installations, sensitive installations, will be in the red zone, where you will require a specific permission from the MHA and the MOD, which is basically the Home Ministry and the Ministry of Defense, to operate in those areas. And for the yellow areas, it will be slightly simpler, and all this will be enabled through the Digital Sky platform that you earlier spoke and Rajan also elaborated on. So because we don't want people to be going helter-skelter, and we don't want to be inundated with a flurry of emails because we just don't have the wherewithal to handle that, and it's also very messy. And as I said, when thousands of drones fly, there's no way we can do it in a manual way. So we can't have a manual sky, it has to be a digital sky. And that's the whole vision behind the single window platform, right from your registration to operation to flight path tracking, remote ID, and also post-flight logging your flight path, even while drones are flying, to deconflict them. One is a static deconfliction and one is a dynamic deconfliction. When two drones are actually flying, they should maintain a reasonable separation, both lateral and vertical. So all those things will be managed through this single window digital sky, with the help of a lot of UTM operators who will do the local area traffic management. So that's all what the vision is, and we are working towards that. We're also working with one big reason behind the current delay, and I'll be very open and honest in saying that what we thought we will do it by this year and may get stretched by a few more months, is because the zonal map, the red zone data, is currently being collected by various security agencies and being handed over to Ministry of Defense, and they are the ones who will then pass on a part of that information to the digital sky, the non-sensitive part. So that data collection for a vast country like India, from different states and from different central agencies, that has taken a little more time than we thought. But I think this is a delay worth waiting for, because these are sensitive issues, and putting some of those sensitive locations on a map is a very, very touchy issue. So it may take some time to resolve. But having said so, already there are 6 green zones which have already been identified near the 6 metros, and there people are indeed flying. But of course, we want to take it to a much larger area. So I think we have to just wait and watch, as I said, because it's a sensitive issue. And we'll go by what the directions we get from Ministry of Home and Ministry of Defense. Kriti?
Well, absolutely. Those were technical details, but you made it absolutely lucid for us. But moving on, Mr. Luthra, the drone space in India is gaining momentum. We can say that. But how do we catch up with the global trends?
I think this was something which came up at a recent event where we were looking at some case studies from USA, from Switzerland, from Israel. And I think what was found was that we are not far behind. I think we have managed to catch up by a fair bit. There are areas where some of these countries have taken multiple years where they have developed some of the capabilities in these areas. But I think at a more macro level, there is enough infrastructure and enough capability and the vision, actually. Let me briefly mention about that from a capability perspective. When recently the Prime Minister launched the property cards for the rural villages, I think that was a very significant event, which was enabled by the Sumitpa project, which again had the drone, one of the drones in the background of that launch event. I think these are the kind of transformation projects that are already happening, as Mr. Dubey was also mentioning. And I think it's just a matter of maybe, in my view, between 6 to 12 months where we can catch up with most of these advanced countries. The industry, if I can just add maybe one more point.
Yes, sir.
The academic and the startup industry is very, very strong. And I think that's what has been very encouraging for me as well in our engagements and even in our investment in one of these drone companies, that the ecosystem and the internal indigenous capability is already very strong. And now it's a matter of some extra effort being put in to showcase that and make this as genuinely making India the drone hub of the world, as the minister pointed out a few weeks back.
And finally, Mr. Dubey, closing comments from you.
Well, I'll be repetitive if I say that drones are the future of aviation. The sort of capabilities they have is immense. The government our job is the easiest part, wherein all the hard work is done by the industry, and our job is more of that of a facilitator and a catalyst. We also have a Dronacharya WhatsApp group where you have these very, very young people fresh out of college, and they have direct access to the senior most people in the ministry, in the regulators, on the NSA side, in the armed forces. And it's a very, very healthy discussion which happens on those groups. I learn a lot every day when I read some of those messages, and also the challenges which are highlighted by the industry. We try and to address them. Of course, we can't solve all the problems in one go, but the sheer fact that we have on a simple WhatsApp group where we have the startups, the academia, some very, very senior professors from IIT, from Indian Institute of Science, from Anna University, and from the regulators, and as I mentioned, from the government. So I think we are on the right track, and the more we collaborate, I think the faster we'll grow. And inshallah, by Diwali next year, I think most of these issues that we spoke about on this program will all get sorted out. Over to you, Kriti. Thank you so much.
Well, absolutely. We do hope so. And on that note, thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen, on Policy Watch Show. So the policy document aims to create a roadmap for enabling high-density, complex operational scenarios of UAS operations in the low-level airspace in India. That's all we had for you in this edition of Policy Watch. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Rajya Sabha TV.